Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven from Xkurani Photos. Today with my very own user experience review with this Canon R8 which I bought with my own money. I am mainly a Nikon user for the past 12-13 years, and currently my main shooter is a Nikon Z8 by the way. So I'm buying into a second camera system over here, but at the same time I did have my occasional flings with Canon in the past. I did buy Canon DSLRs in the past. I still have the 200D somewhere in my studio. I also briefly used Canon RP and R5 as well. So it is not like I am completely oblivious to Canon. I know how their buttons, how their menus and systems work. So with that in mind, one has to ask, why did I buy into Canon RF as my second system instead of Sony? Because E-mount lenses can be adapted to Nikon Z, right? Well, I have made a video explaining why. The link is right up there. It mostly has to do with the lenses that I want. But who knows, maybe I could be the next YouTuber to make a video on why did I jump ship from Canon to Sony. Like, that is kind of like a thing over here on YouTube for some reason. And I'm just setting it up that way. I bought the Canon R8 pre-owned, but also lightly pre-owned for just under $1,100 US equivalent. And there was 2 years and 11 months of warranty left out of 3 years. And that is one of the main motivating factors why I bought the Canon R8. It is because I could get full frame for really cheap, right? So moving on to the physicals of this body. The button placement, the grip and everything, ergonomics and so on. Specifically ergonomics, this is where I can give Canon almost full marks when it comes to comfort with using the camera. Sometimes I had to ask myself, how did Canon even do it? Because this camera at 460 grams, including a battery and memory card, this is 50 grams lighter than a Nikon Z52, which is APS-C, and this is barely 50 grams heavier than a Nikon Z30, which is the smallest APS-C camera in Nikon's lineup. But you get full frame, you get an EVF. So how did Canon even do it? I have no idea. The EVF on the Canon R8 is only 2.36 million dots. It is just fine, very entry-level stuff, but it is to be expected at this price point. Despite being such a small camera by full-frame standards, this camera fits my hand so nicely. It was like 90% perfect. And then once I added this cage over here, it is like 100%, no complaints over here. And once again, how did Canon even do it? Because this is remarkably comfortable to hold and use, and I could not say the same for many Sony cameras. But this is also where the positive parts end with the Canon R8, because I also have a bunch of complaints with it. Mainly with the buttons over here, we are lacking customizable function buttons. There is only one single tiny function button on top over here, and I have assigned it to ISO. The problem is, even though ISO is one of the main settings we use and change on every camera, I have barely touched that function button, and the reason is I couldn't find the button. This may sound hilarious, but you know, whenever I put the viewfinder up to my eyes, I'm photographing something on the streets, and then I want to change the ISO, and I'll be like, where is the ISO button? Why does this camera have no ISO button? Even with muscle memory, I couldn't locate this tiny function button with my index finger. And then my brain would glitch out a little bit. I'll be staring at my camera, where do I change the ISO even though the function button is right in front of me? And then 5 seconds later, I would decide to change it by using the touch screen. And by then, the moment I wanted to photograph on the street, the moment is already gone. So I feel like I'm being slowed down when I'm using this camera compared to bigger camera bodies in general with more buttons and dials. And that is perhaps my biggest frustrations with this camera. There are also no customizable buttons on the front grip over here, even though I understand that this is an entry-level full-frame camera in the way. Nikon has been adding these customizable function buttons to every camera they make, including the entry-level Z30. Yeah, the 2 buttons in front here. But Canon is reserving it for their higher-end R5, I think R6 as well, for segmentation reasons. And yeah, I miss those 2 buttons in front at the grip region. Moving on to the rear LCD screen, a very nice quality LCD panel which is fully articulating, and this is one of the main factors why I bought the Canon R8. Number 1, full frame. Number 2, fully articulating LCD. And number 3, it is cheap. So currently, Nikon does not have a camera under $2,500 or even under $2,000 that has a fully articulating screen. The closest one is the ZF, but the ZF does not have full frame 4K 60p uncropped, which is something I want. So the next best thing would be the R8. The only choice, in fact. Yeah. Maybe until the Nikon Z5 Mark II drops, where we will get a fully articulating screen for sure, but I'm not certain if that camera will be capable of full frame 4K 60. That's the problem. On the side of the camera, we do have mic and headphone jack as usual, and micro HDMI, which everyone hates, but this is a small camera, understandable. And of course, USB Type-C, right, for charging and powering the camera. On the bottom of the camera, we get a battery slot, a single SD card slot, and yeah, I think at this point, $1,100, I'm not expecting to have dual card slots to begin with, so I'm totally fine with that. Before I discuss about battery life, one last thing about the hardware, which is the battery door itself. This is a Canon only thing, I believe, and it is extremely annoying. If the camera is turned on and you open the battery door, yes, the camera will switch off on its own. My older Canon DSLRs, they do the same thing. So this appears to be a thing with all Canon cameras regardless of which model. I'm so used to hot swapping memory cards on my Nikon cameras when the camera is still turned on. But to see the camera turned off whenever I open any doors, yeah, it triggers me a bit. I'm still struggling to adapt to this change over here. To be fair to Canon, this could be a safety-related feature. If you are using a weather-sealed camera out there in the rain and then you forgot to secure the doors, water gets in and short-circuits the camera. So this is probably to protect the camera in a way, right? So how do you use a dummy battery? As usual, there is a rubber flap on the side of the door over here for you to pass through a wire. I just don't like this design at all for the rubber flap, because each time I want to swap between a real battery and a dummy battery, I will need to remove my entire camera cage in order to release the cable. The older design, which is a hole on the battery door, was way better for dummy batteries. Battery life is horrible. There are no other nicer ways to put it. So with photography, I'm not sure how to measure battery life based on how many shots I take, because everyone's photography style is different. For me, I love shooting stuff on the streets in addition to in studio. So a lot of the time, I will be looking at the viewfinder but not taking any shots if I don't like the composition I'm getting. So with this in mind, I get like 150 photographs or 200 maximum, and then the battery will run out, which is very poor. If you burst fire a lot, which this camera can do up to like 40 frames per second electronic, then maybe you can get 1,000, 1,500 easily. This camera can shoot up to 40 frames per second in RAW, in electronic shutter, but there is a big catch, where in electronic shutter mode, you can only shoot in 12-bit RAW, which explains why you can shoot so fast, but the dynamic range is not going to be great. So personally, this is more of a 6 FPS camera to me. As for video recording times, not good as well. This is a very interesting finding to me, because regardless of whether I went for the higher quality standard IPB, or I went for the lower quality, lower bitrate and smaller file size IPB Lite, I get the same exact recording times of 1 hour and 5 minutes, very precise, very exact, 1 hour and 5 to 6 minutes in 4K 30 on one battery. So you're not saving anything at all by recording in IPB Lite. All it does is lighten the workload on the computer doing editing, I suppose. Moving on to 4K 60, standard IPB, this is where you see overheating, because the camera is doing full frame 4K 60 with no crop at all, and it is actually downsampling from 6K. And at this resolution and frame rate, standard IPB, I got anywhere between 30 to 35 minutes before the camera stops recording completely due to overheating. If I let the camera cool down and continue, then the total recording time is only 40 minutes per battery. Yeah, that's pretty poor. Once again, 4K 60 IPB Lite, Just because you go to light, it does not mean you get more battery life. Same thing, 40 minutes in one battery, but no overheating in IPB light. Personally, I don't mind the overheating part in 4K 60 because 60 frames per second is slow-mo stuff to me. 2x slow-mo, which means I won't be doing very long video recordings. Slow-mo means B-rolls, which are not very long video clips to begin with. But the 1 hour recording time in 4K 30 is indeed a concern to me, and if you are like me, you do very long videos. Some of my videos go over 1 hour easily in my other channel, by the way. Then you'll want a dummy battery or USB power. Moving on to the next section, which is user interface, menus, and navigation. I'll keep this as short as possible. All I can say is that I like Canon's menus more than Nikon's, even though I am a Nikon user. In my Nikon Z8 review, I complained about how bloated and unfriendly the menu is, but on Canon, it feels like it is so easy to find a setting that I want. So it is very beginner friendly over here. But if there is one complaint I have about Canon in general, it has to be custom white balance. Like, what year is this? It feels like using an entry DSLR camera from 10 or 15 years ago, where you need to take a photograph and then dive into your photo album and select a very specific picture to be used as a reference picture for custom white balance setting. And each time I want to change custom white balance, I need to repeat the whole process again, take a picture of a gray card of my gray walls over here or a color checker and recalibrate things all over again. There is no custom white balance bank, which my Nikon has. But on the bright side, there is also one feature in the user interface, in the live view mode, which I really love, and that is the focus confirmation mark in manual focus mode. So when you are using manual lenses or you are in manual focusing mode, there is these two triangles over here which will move around depending on how much you turn your focus ring, and whenever you near focus, it will turn green color. And I love this so much because it makes manual focusing so easy. I think this is one of the best implementations of focus confirmation with manual lenses. I am mainly a landscape, street, toy photographer, studio photographer, so I don't push the AF system on this camera nearly as hard as wildlife photographers, though I have both really nice things and really nasty things to say about the AF on this Canon R8 over here. It is not state of the art, I believe, because the newer AF system on Canon R5 Mark II and R1 would be a lot better, but it is still fairly recent. It is like a generation newer than the original R5 and R6, right? So it is very good. Like, when I use this camera, I find it really hard to believe like how good cameras have become. It was quite a revelation that for under $1,500, you can get a camera that can track so well, be it humans, faces, or animals. And you don't necessarily need to spend $6,000 anymore for a flagship just to shoot animals or anything fast moving. Just 12 or 13 years ago, we're looking at early to mid 2010s, right? If you bought a Canon 6D, if you bought a Nikon D600, even the $3,000 Nikon D800, no, you are not shooting wildlife with that. Most of the shots were missed because the AF system just isn't up to scratch. You couldn't track those animals that efficiently. But today, a camera that cost $1,500 or less can do all of that and get you really high hit rates in AF. It is quite mind-boggling when you think about it. So this camera punches way above its weight in AF performance. It can rival higher-end cameras that cost double or more. But there were also occasions where Canon's AF system really annoyed me and frustrated me. It feels like Canon's autofocus system is a tad bit too aggressive. Yes, literally too aggressive. It is a good thing for portrait photographers. If you shoot wedding, if you shoot portraits in general, you are going to love Canon's AF system. But for me, I find it way too aggressive because whenever the camera detects a face in the frame, it will immediately grab the eye, which is supposed to be a good thing. But there has been so many occasions where I did not want the camera to focus on a human subject. I wanted it to focus on something else, but it keeps grabbing the eye of a human subject. So what did I do? Naturally, I would change AF modes. I would turn off subject recognition. But the camera is still grabbing people's eyes even though I turned off subject recognition. And that is so incredibly frustrating because I am a product reviewer. I have another channel that I review stuff. Sometimes if I were to hold a small object right in front of the camera still refuses to focus on that object in front of me. It will jump back into my face, into my eye. That is in AI focus mode with subject recognition turned off. So it is not supposed to detect my face in the first place. There is a small workaround with this where you can switch to AI servo mode, which is a little bit like 3D tracking on Nikons. It works really well, but I have to touch the screen so that it tracks whatever I just touched. So not ideal. So Canon, maybe give us a software update, a firmware where you add a product review mode of some kind, like Sony's do, and even now Nikon has it in the Z50 Mark II. This is an aerial camera to me. This is a camera I use when I talk to a camera, like that, vlogging and so on. So it is always focusing on one single subject, only my face and my eye. And in those kind of scenarios, it is 100% reliable all of the time. So that is great. Moving on to the image quality, 24 megapixels, the same sensor from the R6 Mark II. And that is one of the important reasons why I bought this camera, because you're getting the same image quality as a camera that cost another $1,000. How is the image quality? I would say it is about what you would expect in a 24MP full frame sensor. Not too far off my experience with the Nikon Z6 even. And the dynamic range is way better than the older Canon cameras, be it the RP or the 6D Mark II, I mean. I had experience with the 6D Mark II, it was horrible. And if you look at measurement charts in photons to photos, the 6D Mark II and RP, the amount of dynamic range they have is closer to micro four thirds actually. Of course, it gets really noisy if you go up to ISO 4000, 5000 and so on, but it is about par for the course, about what you would expect. As for the Canon color science in this sensor, in this Canon R8 over here, well, color science is something that many people deny even existing because their logic is that as long as you shoot in RAW, you can edit it to match the look of other cameras, which is true. But it remains a fact that every camera brand, they capture colors very differently, and that applies to both JPEG and RAW. So the way I edit my Canon RAW files and the way I edit my Nikon RAW files, they are quite different, the workflow. Especially with tuning the colors, if there is one word I would use to describe the colors coming out from the Canon R8, it would be very natural. Too natural to a fault even, and some people do prefer that, me not so much. So if there is an analogy I would like to give you guys on what the colors are like coming out from the Canon R8, it feels like looking at pictures I see in a newspaper or a news article of any kind. Which is to say, extremely lifelike, extremely natural and realistic, but very boring to look at. Now this is completely subjective, I get it. It is something very subjective. Some people prefer very realistic, very natural images because maybe their background, they are a journalist, so they need to stay true to everything they capture. But for me, I am more of the creative kind of photographer. Some of my photography works are borderline fine art territory. Yeah, fine art photography. So I love to mess with colors a lot. You know, the Instagram filters, the LUTs, the vintage look. That is the way I tune my images a lot. And for that reason, I feel like it is really hard to bring out the colors inside the raw files of this Canon camera. It feels like the sensor is not capturing enough color data compared to a Nikon sensor, for example. Nikon's sensors capture so much color. The colors are so intense that I have to desaturate them sometimes. But with Canon, it is the exact opposite. I keep finding myself increasing the vibrance or saturation in my editing. Yeah, the exact opposite of Nikon. So if you own both Canon and Nikon and you want the images to match, it is doable, just that the sliders could be going in different directions in Lightroom. Yeah, so color science is actually a thing. They are very different. And unfortunately for me, I can't say I like Canon's default color science, but I am a RAW only guy. I never use JPEGs from any camera. The video quality coming out of this is great. It is excellent. Of course, you can shoot in C-Log 3, and color grade it later, but so far I don't deal with locks that much because I want to simplify my workflow. And in a studio setting like this, you are not dealing with much dynamic range anyway. There is really no need to shoot in lock to begin with, at least when you are indoors. So video quality, I don't really have much complaints, and since there is no IBIS, you are relying on digital stabilization, but the digital step in this camera is extremely good. Like, it makes video footages look very stable. Of course, with an additional crop, but it can be worth it if you are using a non-stabilized lens. So I would say, if you really have to, just use digital step and you'll still get a very good video quality out of this camera. Can I recommend the Canon R8 in year 2025 and even beyond? A big yes. It is far from a perfect budget camera. It has many things missing, but for everything else that it has, it does it very right. But once the Z5 Mark II comes out, then yeah, this camera will have serious competition. Anyways, if you don't mind the limited lens selection of Canon RF lenses, a known problem at this point, or you are an existing Canon EF user, then the R8 is a very good upgrade from that. Yes, continue to use your EF lenses. Just adapt your EF lenses because pre-owned EF L lenses are very affordable right now. And even though it may be a little bit unbalanced in terms of size and weight distribution, I think it is worth it. So, highly recommended. That is my final verdict on this camera despite the flaws.